the structures, make sure that they aren't going to get singed in the effort. And then over here on the right, this was from the warm fire up on the North Rim. And I think it's a good reminder as to what could happen in our mixed conifer, spruce and fir forest. And it's a stand replacement type of tree structure. And so, in other words, it grows dense and then fire replaces it. But it's usually the interval is very long, up to like 30 to 40 years before you have something in terms of stand replacement. And so, but if you have it in an unnatural sense where something's fueling it and it ignites because of outside influence, then you interrupt that cycle. So one thing that we're trying to do is learn from the warm fire, which was on the North Rim, on the forest, and try to understand how can we treat our mixed conifer and reintroduce fire into it without losing it completely. So it's quite a task. Okay, our wildlife program. So lots of birds, 373 species so far that we've been able to count. 91 species of mammals, 17 species of fish, not all native, and then 57 species of reptiles and amphibians. But it's quite a diverse area in terms of wildlife. At the same time, the non-natives that we have some historic and some current impacts. So if you all remember the story about trying to get rid of the burrows out of Grand Canyon, and what a controversy that was in terms of, well, how do you get rid of burrows out of Grand Canyon? So it was everything from, well, let's go in and shoot them, to, no, let's not go in and shoot them, that's not a good idea, so then helicoptering them out. And there's still some remnants of burrows that exist over on the northwest side of the canyon that we're finding coming out of Parashant in that area. But more important today is the bison issue. And this is, it's a hybrid that was, bison were brought in the early 1900s. And at the time, I think they looked at trying to make bison more sturdy. I don't know how you make bison more sturdy than bison, but they thought if they mixed it with cattle, then they would be, more able to adjust and live with up in this environment. And so you can see the result of this mixture of a cattle, some cattle and bison. So we call them catalones for short. And they still exist today. So they started up on the North Rim. Then in the 50s, the Game and Fish and the Forest Service got together with an agreement that they would bring them down into House Rock Valley and keep them in House Rock Valley, which they did for a while. And then it ended up that Game and Fish could actually have a trophy hunt if they didn't have confined animals. So they cut the fences and let them go so that they could have a trophy hunt, which would make them more money. And then in the 80s, we had a lot of fires that occurred up on the North Rim. And bison, being bison, follow fire because it then clears the area and then you have grass. So the bison then ended up, or the cattle ended up traveling into the park, and now that's where they spend most of their time. And the estimates right now are upwards to 300 bison that are existing in the park and causing quite an impact in terms of vegetation, water sources, spring sources, and so forth. We have a cooperative together with the Forest Service, the Game and Fish, North Rim branches of the Grand Canyon Trust, and NAU. And the students from NAU have been studying this, and we'll have a master's student that's going to be working on it as well. But to help us bring all this history together and come up with a solution that's lasting. Wildlife-human interactions. Okay. So anybody know the name of the elk on the left?
Priscilla.
Priscilla? No? March. It's actually Dennis, but I think Dennis wants to be called Dennis the Menace. But I think after this little headdress that he'd rather be called Denise. But Dennis is, and we have quite a few Dennises in the park, but the elk get tangled up in a lot of things around the village. We've seen, let's see, there's been everything from wading pools, you know, little kids' wading pools, to hose, from gardening hoses, and Christmas lights. That looks really good on them. But as you can imagine, trying to go out and get this off of an elk, what it takes. And the wildlife biologists are always cringe when they get a call that, you know, like, for example, 2 elk were hung up in the soccer net at the high school because they forgot to take the nets down and so forth. But elk have an interesting history at the canyon in the sense that they really didn't, they once existed there, but then became extinct from the earth, extricated, and then the Rocky Mountain elk were reintroduced to this area in Flagstaff, and then have slowly migrated back to the park. And it was in the early 80s, late 1970s, we started developing reclaimed water at the park. And then there was a lot of reclaimed water that was left over, so we let that go down into a drainage, and all of a sudden elk started showing up. So in the 1980s, when I was at the park, we never saw an elk. But now there are a significant population in the park and causing somewhat of a problem as it relates to human interactions. And if you all know Kim Crumbo, he can tell you a story about being trampled by one on his early morning jog in the morning. And so there's a real concern about visitors and how they may be affected by certain animals. So we have this program on human interactions, wildlife human interactions. Feeding of animals is one aspect, and looking at with squirrels as well as the deer, but others, and then habituating the animals, and then what we have to do after that in regard to if that becomes a problem. The other thing is wildlife are killed most often by vehicles in the park. So in our mountain lion population, I think it was all but 2 of the deaths in the last 4 years were car deaths. We've had 9 or 10 cougar or lions that have been killed by cars. So as one idea is to put up signs for warning, and if you drive on the 64 as you go out to Desert View, you'll see these cougar signs that are up now. Uh-oh. Oh. Okay, so our wildlife program, our mountain lion program, this is one significant one that we're looking at in terms of human interaction, wildlife human interaction. And the idea is to just, first of all, get a handle on what is the mountain lion population in Grand Canyon, what are their patterns, where do they go, and what are they doing, and how close to the village are they getting, and are we going to see, and what are we going to do if we see human interaction with the mountain lion. These are a set of cubs that were found 2 years ago, and from the tracking, and pretty cute, huh? These happen to be, I don't know if you're familiar, but Eric York was our wildlife biologist who tragically contracted plague from one of the cougars that he was following, happened to be the mother of these kittens. So unfortunately, he believed that they probably, at the time, I mean, when he found the mother and that, he hadn't become sick yet, but he believed that the kittens probably didn't survive as well because they weren't at an age to be fed. Okay, so what we do is we go out and try to collar as many as we can, and this is an example of following the point. So this is a whole year of following this female, and you can see the village is over on the very right. So this is out towards the South Bass Trailhead, and well, from Hermit's Rest on. So you can see how far, and each one of those dots is a different month. So you can see how far that she traveled in a year in the area that she covered, and that's just one. And this is another one that actually went from the south rim to the north rim.